Hello everyone. Let's add the feature to edit our ideas. This will be quite extensive, but at the same time, there's nothing complicated. Everything will do, you already know how to do. I suggest starting with the backend route. Let's call it updateIdea. So, first, let's define its input. New file input.ts. I propose to inherit the input from createIdea input, because essentially, we have all the same fields except that we'll also need to specify the ID of the idea we're editing. Therefore, we just import the existing input createIdea and do a familiar extend, adding an ID. ID is needed so that we can understand on the server which idea the user who sent this request is trying to edit. Okay? And now let's add the code for the endpoint itself. New file.index.ts. Let's analyze it. Well, we have an input that we just declared. This is a mutation, and we split the input into the following IDs. An input, meaning the idea itself, includes name, nickname, description, and text, and extract the ID from this object. Now they are separated. If we are not authorized, we throw an error. We look for the idea specified by this ID. Assume we didn't find this idea, then it's a not found error. But it's not human readable, because that won't happen either. If we showed the person a page with the idea, it means we already found it before. Good. Excellent. We have checked the existence of the idea. Then we check if we, as an authorized user, are the author of this idea. If this idea is not ours, we also prohibit editing this idea and throw an error. This is not your idea. All right. Then we have such a nuance. We still need to check that our username is unique in our system. Right? Because we can't just do such a check without additional conditions, because our current idea is its username. So, for example, let's consider two cases. A person has already created an idea with a unique username, came to change it, and changed, say, the text of the idea but didn't change its username. Then it should successfully save. And there is another case. He came and changed the username of the idea. And then you need to perform this check. But it's reasonable to perform this check only when the username has changed. That is, in the existing idea, the username does not match the one provided in the input. Then we search for an existing idea with this username. And if the idea already exists, we will also return an error. An idea with this username already exists. If the username hasn't changed, we won't perform this check. Because if the username hasn't changed and we call this search, our current idea with the same username will return in the X idea. That's it. Such a nuance. Okay. We made sure the username is unique. And in Prisma, there's such a method. It can be called on any entity, whether it's a user or an idea. In this case, it's the idea update. We update the records where everything matches the conditions specified in where. That is, the ID, this one. And we set the data we passed in the input. That's it. We set them and returned just true. We're good. Great. Added the endpoint. Now let's create a page for editing the idea. So, pages, edit, idea, page, new, folder. Edit, idea, page, and init, file, index, x. So, this will be quite a large file, but again, there won't be anything fundamentally new in it. So, okay, let's add this page to the roots now and then we'll go through its code. So, roots. Since this will be an endpoint with parameters, it will be a bit more complex. Complex? Yes. Edit. Idea. Roots. It also accepts idea, nick. And its endpoint will be like this. That is, ideas, /idea, nick. And at the end, a note, edit. All right. Okay. And I'll need Lodash here, so let's install it right away. We've already installed Lodash, but we installed it only in the backend. We'll need it in the front end now. Endpoint, npm, vinstall, Lodash. We also need to install Lodash types. Right, and install the type. Okay, excellent. Types added, but it turned out we forgot to pass our newly created roots generate index to the index file. Great. Update, idea, added. Let's break it down. We'll start from the beginning. Here's our edit idea page. It takes the idea nick from the route's parameters. Further code is essentially the same as we had on the idea viewing page. Right. But it's also important here to know our user, to understand if they can edit it or not. Let's go from top to bottom. So we called two queries here, getIdea and getMe. GetIdea. As usual, we simply called with idea nick. GetMe without any parameters. Next, we perform loading checks. All right, if getIdea loading or fetching or getMe loading or fetching, and if any of them are even slightly loading, then we display loading. In getMe, we then check for errors. If the error is here, we input the getIdea error. If it's an error in getMe, we input the getMe error. Yeah, right here. Then, if our idea is not found, which happens sometimes, we return null. Here, we say that the idea is not found. Okay? Then we simply extract the actual idea and me from these objects. If I'm not authorized and me returned null, for example like that, we will return an error that it's only for authorized users. Again, if my ID doesn't match the idea author's ID, then there will be a message stating that only authors can edit their ideas. And after we passed all these checks, we render the component with our form. It's located right on this page. Let's take a look at it now. Here's an interesting thing. We pass an idea into it, and we know the type of this idea based on what the endpoint returned. But here, we need to specify the types correctly. So, we go to this edit idea component. And the types here don't seem simple at first glance. Because we don't declare them ourselves, we have to get them from the backend, but through type specification. For this, we will need the TRPC router output, which we haven't declared yet. Let's go and declare it. We just have a TRPC router type, and we need to add two more lines like this: export type TRPC router input and TRPC router output. These types will help us declare our types on our front end. Okay, this wrapper React-FC means that this is a React component. It's almost the same if you write it like this, and it's probably more readable this way, so let's leave it like that. Okay, so the idea is what the TRPC router returns for the getIdea endpoint within the idea object. But in this situation, we know that our idea can be null, or it can be an object. Fundamentally, yes. But in this component, the idea already comes to us after checking that it exists, and we know for sure that it is not null there. Therefore, we wrap it in non-nullable, and we get the idea that cannot be null. Okay? And then there is the familiar component with a regular form. Here's what we use navigate for: submitting error, mutation update idea. In formic initial values, we use Lodash's pick, which we took from Lodash to pass the idea and an array of the elements we need, because the idea contained more. There was also the author, created add, and we only need these fields because these are the only fields we edit. All right, we have the initial values, a hard-to-read type, but you can tell what will be there from this line. Okay, then we have validation. The form validation is taken from the backend in the same way, but for form validation, we don't need IdeaD here. Therefore, we'll omit it. This is also a method of Zod. Like there's extend, the reverse function you could say is omit. We say that IdeaId needs to be removed from this object. Good. And then it submits. We set an error if it was null. We send our data. We take values from the form and idea.id from the past idea. Good. And if everything went successfully, then we redirect the person to the page for viewing this idea. So, regarding JSX, here is just our segment where the header is displayed, that we're editing an idea with such a nickname. And then, the usual form inputs are exactly the same as on the idea creation page. Well, we've looked at these fields 100 times already. I won't go over them again. All right? Here, we've created the page, and we can go and see how it works. Okay, here is our super idea, author, LLC. All right, let's add a /edit at the end. And we forgot to add our page to app.esx. Let's add it. Edit idea page. Roots. Edit idea root params. And get edit idea route. Okay. And now? And now they tell us it's for authorized users only. Let's authorize. We have a pre-prepared user. Okay. All these errors are not errors. In general, logs are all given by the one password extension. So if you also have password set up, don't worry. It's all it's doing. This is not related to our project. Okay? Now we're authorized. We reach here. Go to /edit. Great. We are shown a form pre-filled with all the information about our idea. This all works because we requested our idea and passed the idea data into initial values. That's it. All fields are here. And let's add a to everywhere, except for the nickname. updateIdea. Idea updated and redirected us here. And now we see that the data is updated. Let's move to all ideas. Everything's in order here. Let's try changing the nickname of this idea. Edit. Super idea 2. Update idea. And see, it redirected us to the correct page. Good. Let's take a look at the code that determined where to redirect. It knew the nickname might change, and it took it specifically from values, and it redirected to the page with the new nickname if it was updated, or with the old one if it wasn't. Great. But it's not very convenient for us to land on the idea editing page now. So I suggest adding a button on the idea view page that only the author would see. Okay, good. Moving to the idea viewing page. And now, to show the button only for the author, we need to know who our current user is, to understand if they are the author or not. For this, we'll immediately call two hooks, and the code will look similar to what we had on the edit idea page. So essentially, nothing old has changed, just a request to get me was added. Just like that. Check for loading. Check for all possible errors. If the idea is not found, then we display it. And if the idea is found, we assign it to a variable. Now we need to remove the date postfix here, because we have already moved everything into a separate variable. Okay? And we need to add a check for authorship. It looks as follows. As is known, we can have num in me. Because perhaps an unauthorized user is viewing this idea, and that's why we take their ID if they have one. And if there is an ID, and it matches the author of this idea's ID, then we will display the button. We currently have a button component, but it is specifically a form element. And we want this button to have the style of a button, but actually be a link. For this, we need to create the appropriate component. We already have the root, but we still need to create the button. Since it's a button, I suggest creating it right in the same component because they also share the same styles. It will look like this. We take the link component from React Router. Otherwise, these components are very similar. They are also in CSS for buttons. And here, in reality, this construct is even redundant. But considering you most likely copied it, you can also leave it as it is. Although nothing prevents replacing it with this. But if this construction is already written, let it stay. Because maybe soon you'll want to add some new optional property, and the construction is already there. That will also be fine. Type submit shouldn't be there, of course. And the link you export from React Router has the to property. You need to pass the path to the new root into it. Well, the children inside this link can be anything. Good. So, we added the component. Now we import it. But we also need to add margin from this button in the CSS style. There will be a margin. Good. Let's check if it works. So, edit idea appeared, and it leads to a root, because I am the author. Good. Let's log in as another user and create another idea. And let's see if we don't see this button under another user. Logging out, signing up. We had oh no. Let's have user PPP. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sign up. Okay. Moving to the super idea page. And we no longer see this button. Very good. But let's create our own. Good idea. Good idea. Good idea description. Good idea text. Created the idea. Going to check it out. Here we have an edit button. And here we don't have an edit button. Very good. We achieved exactly what we wanted. Great. As you can see, a lot of code is written, but we haven't done anything fundamentally new right now. So I expect that you already feel some confidence and realize that you can literally start creating full-fledged features. You have enough skills for this. You're doing great. You've come a long way, and I thank you for your efforts and successes. Let's move on.